The Linguaverse, Episode 2. The Tongue Remembers. Welcome back to the Linguaverse. Your tongue is more than a muscle. It is memory made flesh. Every word you speak carries the imprint of words spoken to you, repeated, whispered with love, spat with anger, or withheld altogether. Think of the first time a child says mama or pa. The sound isn't random. It's shaped by the child's careful imitation of the mouths they see and the tones they hear. Long before a child knows the rules of grammar, their tongue remembers shape and sound. It remembers the way lips pressed into a kiss when saying love, or the way tension sharpened the no that stopped their hand from reaching for the stove. The tongue remembers because the body remembers. In episode 1 we asked, what is language? We traced definitions, theories, and cultural mirrors. Now we turn inward. This episode explores how language is carried not only in dictionaries, grammars, or collective cultures, but in the living archive of our flesh. The tongue remembers. It remembers because words are never neutral. They come charged with emotion, history, and embodied experience. A word like lazy can carry humiliation in one person and affectionate teasing in another. A phrase like you're normal might sound comforting in passing, but in reality, it creates a triangulation. This is normal, therefore you are not. In this way, language is never just a definition. It is an inscription. It writes itself into the nervous system. This is what I call the Somatic Lexicon, the body's dictionary. Each entry is not just a meaning, but a sensation, an emotional resonance, a memory. Where the Oxford English Dictionary might tell us normal means conforming to a standard, the Somatic Lexicon tells us whether that word lands as comfort or condemnation, whether it makes our shoulders ease or our chest tighten. In this episode, we'll explore how the tongue acts as a messenger of this Somatic Lexicon, why words spoken in childhood are stored as visceral memories, how silence itself becomes an entry in the body's dictionary, why repetition makes words into identity, and how the tongue can also be used to rewrite its own memory. As I've journeyed deeper into languages, French, German, Italian, later Spanish, and more recently Swedish, I've become fascinated by how the body adapts. Spanish came more easily. Its rolling R's and flowing vowels felt natural, an extension of rhythms I'd already heard. But Swedish was a different challenge. Its melody, its rounded vowels, its precise enunciation forced my tongue to move in ways that felt alien. I stumbled not because I didn't know the words, but because my tongue wasn't trained to remember them. It reminded me that language is not just learnt. It is an embodied practice. The tongue must learn new memories, new habits, new shapes. So as we step into the tongue remembers, keep in mind, language isn't only a thing we know. It is something we carry, something the body recalls long after the mind has forgotten. The body's dictionary, the human body, is not just a vessel for language. It is its archive. Every sigh, every shout, every whispered secret leaves its trace. Neuroscience shows us that memory is not confined to the hippocampus or the frontal lobes. Emotional memory, in particular, lives in the amygdala, a structure deep in the brain that processes fear, attachment, and survival. But the amygdala doesn't simply store concepts. It stores feelings. This is why words are not remembered in the abstract. They are remembered as sensations. When you hear the word failure, you don't think only of its dictionary definition. You might feel a quickening pulse, a tightening in the stomach, a memory of a teacher's scolding tone. When you hear beloved, you might feel warmth in the chest or recall the softness of someone's embrace. These are not accidents. They are the body's lexicon at work. Mirror neurons and the tongue's memory scientists have discovered that the same neurons that fire when we act also fire when we observe someone else doing it. These are called mirror neurons, and they may be the bridge between language and embodiment. When a baby sees their caregiver say no with a furrowed brow, the baby's mirror neurons don't just process the sound. They simulate the tension. They learn the emotional weight attached to the word. Later, when the child says no themselves, their tongue doesn't only shape the sound, it recalls the emotion. This is the beginning of the Somatic Lexicon, a dictionary not written in books, but carved into neural pathways and muscular habits. Case study, normal. Consider the word normal. On the surface, it appears harmless. To be normal is to belong, to fit, to conform. But in reality, normal is one of the most manipulative words we inherit. Applied to people, normal is always a comparison. It says this is the standard, and you are either inside it or outside it. It creates what I call a societal triangulation, a word that places you in a hierarchy, whether you asked for it or not. For a child, being told they are not normal is devastating. It strips identity, leaving only deficiency. Even the reassurance, don't worry, you're normal, carries a hidden charge. You must belong, you must conform, you must erase difference to be accepted. The body doesn't hear normal as neutral. It hears it as a demand. Shoulders tense, breath shortens, the self shrinks. And once this entry is inscribed into the Somatic Lexicon, the tongue remembers it, repeating it in self-criticism, fearing it in silence, chasing it in comparison. Normal is a prime example of how words are not simply tools of communication. They are tools of control, personal reflection, Learning new memories. When I began studying Spanish, the language felt natural in my mouth, and because of mutual intelligibility with Italian, due to its Latin roots. Its open vowels and lyrical cadence made my tongue relax into flow. Words like corazon or esperanza carried warmth and immediacy. My somatic lexicon didn't resist them. They felt like home waiting to be spoken. Swedish, on the other hand, was another story. Its rounded vowels, rising intonations, and clipped consonants challenged my tongue. I had to wrestle with pronunciation, repeating sounds over and over until my mouth remembered. At times, I felt frustration, even embarrassment, my tongue rebelling against unfamiliar shapes. This experience reminded me that the somatic lexicon is not fixed. It expands, it adapts. The tongue can learn new memories, but not without effort, repetition, and sometimes humility. To learn a new language is to rewrite the body's dictionary, to teach the tongue to remember differently. The somatic lexicon defined. So what is the somatic lexicon? It is the collection of words and meanings inscribed in the nervous system through embodied experience. Unlike a written lexicon, which tells us what words mean, the somatic lexicon tells us how words feel. It is why mother might soothe in one person and ache in another. Why home might mean safety for some, suffocation for others. Why normal can carry comfort in one body and condemnation in another. The somatic lexicon is personal, cultural, and intergenerational. It is built from tone, gesture, silence, and repetition as much as from vocabulary. And the tongue is its messenger, recalling words not only as abstract signs, but as embodied echoes. Micro-reflection. What word in your personal dictionary carries weight beyond its definition? Where in your body do you feel it? Microactivity, write that word down. Say it aloud once. Notice how your breath, your posture, and your muscles react. That reaction is your somatic lexicon speaking. The weight of words in the nervous system language lives not only in books, but in the body. Some words drift in and out of our lives with little consequence. But others, especially those tied to trauma, repetition, or absence, become etched into our nervous systems with an iron stylus. They don't just enter the dictionary of the mind. They scar the somatic lexicon of the body. When a child hears the word stupid shouted in rage, their body doesn't record the definition of stupidity. It records the tone, the look in the caregiver's eye, the clenching of fists. The word fuses with shame, heat, and contraction. Even decades later, the adult may hear stupid as an echo, their body responding before their mind catches up. This is how trauma makes the tongue remember. It's not the word alone. It's the way the word was delivered, the emotional charge wrapped around it, the silence that followed. Withheld language. Sometimes the most powerful words are the ones never spoken. In families where love is never named, children grow up with a gap in their somatic lexicon. They might feel affection in a hug or security in a meal, but the absence of I love you leaves a missing entry in the body's dictionary. The nervous system knows something is missing, even if it cannot name it. Other times, what's withheld are affirmations of worth. A parent who never says, I'm proud of you, may believe their pride is obvious, but to the child, the omission leaves a question mark that never fully closes. The nervous system learns not from what is felt, but from what is not reinforced. Withheld language can also be protective in some families. Words about grief, sex, or fear are avoided in the hope of sparing children. But the body still registers the absence. The child senses the heaviness of the unsaid and learns, this is something we cannot name. In this way, what is withheld becomes as formative as what is spoken. The somatic lexicon is not just filled with words we heard, but scarred by the ones we did not. Repetition. When words become identity, repetition is the mechanism by which words shift from descriptions into definitions. A single insult might sting, but repeated insults become identity. When a child is told again and again that they are worthless, lazy, or annoying, those words stop being temporary judgments. They become permanent entries in the somatic lexicon. They are repeated often enough that the child internalizes them, their own tongue eventually joining the chorus. Repetition doesn't only apply to insults. Praise, too, when overused or tied to conditions, can shape identity in problematic ways. A child constantly praised as clever may grow up terrified of ever appearing foolish. A child called brave might feel unable to admit fear. Repetition inscribes expectations, sometimes as chains. Case study. Behavior. One word that reveals the hidden power of repetition is behavior. On the surface, it sounds simple, a way of describing conduct. She behaved well, he behaved badly. But behavior carries hidden scripts that vary by context, family, and culture. For many children, behaved is shorthand for compliant. To be well behaved often means to be quiet, obedient, and non-disruptive. In school, well behaved is often praised more highly than creativity or curiosity. The child who asks too many questions risks being labeled badly behaved. But behavior is slippery. A child who speaks confidently at home may be praised as well behaved by parents, but the same child in a classroom might be called rude or disruptive for identical actions. In some families, well behaved means polite and respectful. In others, it means invisible, unheard. The word becomes charged with double meanings. When adults praise children with, "You've behaved so well," they may mean thank you for not making things difficult. The child's nervous system learns, to behave is to suppress myself. By adulthood, behaved can echo as compliance, repression, or even self-erasure. Some carry pride in being told they were well behaved. Others carry resentment, remembering the times their true self was silenced in the name of good behavior. This is the power of words like behavior behaved. They sound benign, but their repetition writes deep entries in the somatic lexicon, conditioning bodies into certain shapes. Echoes from my inner child was broken. In my inner child was broken. I explored how repeated words carved themselves into my nervous system. Words used as scolding, not encouragement, became scripts I rehearsed without knowing it. When I look back, behavior was always there, hovering as a measure of my worth. At school, a child was good if they behaved, meaning silent, compliant, and obedient. At home, behavior carried another layer. It was tied to respectability, appearances, and what others might think. Behavior wasn't just about action, it was about identity. The nervous system doesn't easily forget these scripts. Even as adults, many of us find ourselves anxious in authority's presence, fearful of misbehaving in some invisible way. The word behaved continues to echo, reminding us that our worth once hinged on compliance. Trauma, and the somatic lexicon traumatic words, insults, shaming phrases, and silencing commands don't vanish when the moment passes. They linger in the somatic lexicon, often fused with physiological responses. A child shouted at to sit still may, as an adult, feel restless guilt whenever they relax. A person told to stop crying may still find tears choked in their throat decades later. These are not just psychological imprints, they are bodily ones. Psychologist Bessel van der Kolk writes in The Body, keeps the score that trauma is stored in the body as much as in the mind. Words, when used traumatically, become part of that score. The body remembers them, replaying them as reflex. The tongue, then, is not simply repeating words. It is replaying the nervous system's memory of them, breaking the cycle of repetition. If repetition can inscribe identity, then repetition can also transform it. Just as harmful words gain power through being spoken again and again, healing words can reshape the somatic lexicon. But the process is not easy. It requires awareness, recognizing the words that echo in the nervous system. It requires conscious remirroring, surrounding ourselves with contexts where words like behaved or normal are redefined. And it requires patience. Repetition doesn't erase old scripts overnight. Therapy, affirmations, rituals, and reflective practices all work on this principle. They are not simply positive thinking. They are rewritings of the tongue's memory, micro-reflection. What's one word or phrase that was repeated to you in childhood, praise or criticism, that still echoes today? How does your body respond when you hear it now? Microactivity, write that word down. Say it aloud 3 times, once neutrally, once with warmth, once with firmness. Notice how the tone changes your body's reaction. This is the beginning of rewriting repetition. The tongue across generations language does not begin and end with the individual. It flows across generations, passed from caregiver to child, family to family, culture to culture. We inherit not only words themselves, but the emotional scripts attached to them. Language flows through lineage. Think of the words you use most often, the sayings that fall from your tongue without thought. Many of them did not originate with you. They were picked up from parents, grandparents, teachers, neighbors, or entire communities. They became so embedded that you sometimes mistake them for your own. But what we inherit is not just vocabulary. We inherit the charge of words, the pride, shame, humor, or control with which they were first delivered. A child who hears "don't be silly" in a dismissive tone may, as an adult, hear the phrase echo whenever they share something vulnerable. A family that repeats "be polite" with warmth teaches respect. A family that repeats it with severity teaches suppression. Language is thus both archive and instruction. It is an intergenerational transmission that shapes our somatic lexicon, conditioning our bodies to respond to words in ways we often don't consciously choose. 1. Intergenerational transmission. Inheriting emotional scripts. Children don't learn language as abstract definitions. They learn it through tone, expression, and context. They inherit the emotional charge surrounding words. When a child is told to be careful, what registers in their nervous system is not the dictionary definition of caution. It is the caregiver's face, anxious, loving, impatient, fearful. The child learns, careful means danger is near, or careful means my parent loves me enough to protect me. In this way, words are passed down like heirlooms. But unlike jewelry or furniture, they cannot be put aside easily. They are internalized, repeated, and embodied. The child does not just learn the words, they learn the reactions to words. By adulthood, we often carry phrases and scripts that do not feel like our own. We say them to partners, to colleagues, to our own children without stopping to ask, whose voice is this? Where did this come from? 2. Family lexicons. The words that shape us. Every family develops its own lexicon, a set of words, nicknames, phrases, or silences that carry particular meaning within that household. Some are tender, pet names, affectionate phrases, inside jokes. A grandparent who always says, sleep tight, or a mother who calls a child champ leaves echoes of warmth that can last a lifetime. Others are constraining. Don't be silly, boys don't cry, ladies don't swear. These phrases become scripts that define what emotions are allowed and which must be suppressed. Sometimes the same phrase is both comforting and constraining, depending on the context. Be strong might be spoken as encouragement, but also as dismissal. Be polite can be a reminder of respect, or a command to erase one's own feelings. These family words are often carried forward unconsciously. We repeat them as if they were ours, passing them down again without questioning what they mean in the nervous system of the next generation. 3. Case study. Polite few words illustrate the power of intergenerational language as clearly as polite. On the surface, it seems harmless, even virtuous. Politeness is praised across cultures as a sign of respect, civility, and social grace. But beneath the surface, polite carries multiple and often conflicting meanings. Polite as respect in many families. Being polite is equated with kindness. Saying please and thank you, waiting one's turn, listening without interrupting. These are ways of recognizing others' dignity. When taught with warmth, politeness creates safety and reciprocity. The nervous system learns to be polite is to show care. Polite as suppression. But in other contexts, politeness becomes a mask. Children are told to be polite when they don't want to hug a relative, when they dislike a meal, or when they feel uncomfortable. Politeness becomes a script of self-erasure, a demand to smile, nod, and comply even when boundaries are crossed. The body learns to be polite is to silence my truth. Polite as class marker politeness is also culturally loaded. In some societies, politeness signals social status. Certain accents, manners, or phrases are judged as proper, while others are dismissed as rude or uncouth. A child growing up in a working-class family might be corrected on their speech in school, learning that politeness is tied to class conformity as much as to kindness. Polite across cultures. Different cultures define politeness differently. In some East Asian cultures, politeness is tied to hierarchy and deference. In Mediterranean cultures, loudness and expressiveness are not impolite but expected. In English culture, politeness is often equated with restraint. The same action, interrupting for instance, might be rude in one setting but affectionate in another. This is why polite is such a powerful word in the Somatic Lexicon. It sounds simple, but it carries layers of history, family tone, and cultural expectation. Embodied echoes of polite as adults, many of us still feel its echo. We apologize excessively, soften our opinions, or hold back the truth in the name of politeness. Others rebel, refusing politeness altogether as they associate it with repression. For some, the word still makes the body tighten, a remembered command to stay small, quiet, compliant. The tongue remembers politeness not as courtesy, but as caution. 4. Cultural archives, accents, dialects, and taboos. Language flows not just through families but through entire cultures. Accents carry identity and belonging. A regional dialect can make someone feel instantly at home, or expose them to prejudice. Words pronounced correctly or incorrectly often reveal hidden power structures. Taboo words also vary by culture. What is shocking in one context may be neutral in another. For example, in Japanese, there are multiple ways of saying you, each carrying different levels of formality and politeness. In English, you seems neutral, but the weight of tone makes it loaded. Cultural lexicons also include rituals and idioms. The Swedish phrase lagom means just the right amount, a cultural ideal of balance and moderation. In Spanish, que será, what will be, carries a sense of acceptance. These words and phrases reflect not just meaning but entire worldviews. Children growing up bilingual or bicultural often experience this vividly. They learn that the same word can mean very different things depending on context. The tongue must navigate multiple archives, sometimes blending them, sometimes feeling torn between them. 5. Collective memory and historical trauma. Language also carries the weight of history. Traumatic events are passed down through stories or through silences. Descendants of war survivors, refugees, or colonized peoples often inherit not just the facts of history, but the unspoken emotional charge around it. Certain words may be avoided altogether. Others may be repeated with particular heaviness. Even when stories are not told, children sense the presence of unspeakable histories. They inherit the weight of what their elders could not name. This is collective trauma at work in the Somatic Lexicon. Words like shame, foreign, or outsider may be carried for generations, shaping identity long after the original events. The tongue remembers even when the mind does not. 6. Healing the lineage. The good news is that inherited language can be transformed. Just as trauma is passed down through words and silences, healing can also be passed down through new scripts. When we recognize the words we have inherited, we can choose whether to keep or release them. We can reclaim words like polite by teaching them with warmth instead of severity. We can replace dismissive family phrases with affirming ones. We can speak the words that were withheld, I love you, I'm proud of you, creating new entries in the next generation's somatic lexicon. This is where personal reflection becomes collective healing. By changing the words on our tongues, we interrupt the repetition of the past. We free our descendants from the chains of inherited scripts. In the Inversiverse, I spoke of perception and control. In My Inner Child Was Broken, I spoke of how words scarred my nervous system. Here in the Linguaverse, we can see how the tongue is also a site of liberation. To change the words we inherit is to change the worlds we pass on. Micro-reflection. What's one word or phrase you grew up with that you found yourself repeating, whether you wanted to or not? Microactivity. Choose one inherited phrase, family, cultural, or generational. Say it aloud as you first heard it. Then reframe it into something affirming. Speak the new phrase aloud. Notice how your body responds differently. Rewriting the tongue's memory. If trauma and repetition can inscribe words into the nervous system, then the question becomes, can those inscriptions be rewritten? The answer is yes, not by erasing the past, but by layering it with new meaning. Language is plastic, not permanent. Neuroscience offers a helpful lens here. The brain is not fixed, it is plastic. Neuroplasticity refers to the brain's ability to form new pathways, to reorganize itself in response to experience. When we repeat a word differently, in a new context, with a new emotional charge, the body can learn to respond in new ways. The somatic lexicon is not carved in stone. It is more like clay, shaped, reshaped, hardened in some places, softened in others. Take the word strange. For some, it was spoken as exclusion. You're strange, you don't fit in. For others, it was delivered as mockery, a way of marking difference as deficiency. The body registers it as rejection, a sign that belonging is at risk. Or consider crazy. How often is it used to dismiss? Don't be crazy, that idea will never work. The nervous system hears it as a warning, a red flag that difference is unsafe. But reframing opens another layer. Strange can mean original, unconventional, creative. Crazy can mean daring, visionary, unafraid to cross boundaries. These words don't lose their sting entirely, but they gain new resonance. Now, when I hear something strange or crazy, my tongue remembers both the wound of dismissal and the pride of difference. This is the work of rewriting the tongue's memory. It doesn't erase the old entries in the somatic lexicon. It adds new ones, giving us a choice in how we respond. Cognitive reappraisal. The science of reframing. Psychologists call this process cognitive reappraisal. It is the deliberate reframing of an event, word, or memory to change its emotional impact. Imagine someone calling you selfish. Without reappraisal, the word may trigger shame, guilt, or defensiveness. With reappraisal, you might reinterpret it. They see me protecting my boundaries. The word selfish doesn't vanish, but its weight shifts. Neuroscience shows that during reappraisal, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for higher reasoning, activates and dampens the activity of the amygdala, which governs fear and threat. In simple terms, reframing literally changes the brain's response. The tongue, which once tensed at the word, begins to relax. I've experienced this personally. For years, the word broken haunted me. It meant damaged, unworthy, unfixable. But over time, I began to see that being broken was not only a wound, it was also an opening. Brokenness allowed light to enter. Brokenness was how growth found its cracks. By reclaiming the word, I altered its entry in my somatic lexicon. The scar remains, but it no longer dictates my identity. Ritual and repetition. Speaking new spells. If trauma is inscribed through repetition, then healing can also be inscribed through repetition. Words spoken with warmth, consistency, and intention can reshape the somatic lexicon. This is why affirmations, mantras, journaling, and therapeutic dialogues matter. They are not empty recitations. They are deliberate rewritings of embodied scripts. Each repetition builds a new pathway. Each spoken word begins to soften the old scar. Spiritual traditions have known this for centuries. Chanting in Buddhism, recitation in Islam, psalms in Christianity, and mantras in Hinduism are all forms of repetitive language designed to reshape the body and mind. Rhythm and tone alter physiology, synchronizing breath, calming the nervous system, and inducing states of connection. On a personal level, I've experienced this in language learning. Spanish, with its flowing vowels and rolling RS, became easier the more I repeated it. At first, my tongue stumbled, my mouth resisted. But through repetition, the sounds embedded themselves in muscle memory. Swedish presented an even greater challenge. Its rounded vowels and melodic intonation felt foreign at first, clumsy in my mouth. But with practice, repetition, ritual, and patience, my tongue began to remember differently. Learning a new language is not just intellectual, it is embodied reprogramming. The same is true of healing. To speak a word differently, again and again, is to teach the tongue a new way of remembering. Reclaiming ancestral and cultural words. The process of rewriting the tongue's memory is not limited to individuals. Entire communities and cultures engage in it. Marginalized groups have often reclaimed words that were once used against them, transforming labels of exclusion into markers of pride. The principle remains clear. The very words that once oppressed can become words of empowerment when reframed collectively. Families can also heal through spoken reclamation. Parents who grew up without hearing "I love you" can choose to speak it to their children, introducing a word that was withheld from their own lexicon. Communities silenced around grief can begin to name loss openly, adding new entries to collective dictionaries. These acts are not trivial, they are acts of lineage healing. By speaking the absent words, by reclaiming the weaponized words, we interrupt cycles of trauma and create new possibilities for the future, living with contradiction. But let us be honest, healing does not erase old meanings. Words remain layered. When I hear strange, my body still remembers the sting of exclusion. But now it also holds pride in originality. When I hear crazy, I still feel the echo of dismissal. But I also feel creativity, daring, possibility. When I hear broken, I still feel a pang of shame. But I also feel resilience. The contradictions coexist. This is an important truth. Rewriting the tongue's memory is not about perfect erasure. It is about integration. The tongue learns to hold multiple meanings, to speak with complexity rather than simplicity. Human beings are not clean slates. We are palimpsests, manuscripts written over and over, old words still faintly visible beneath new ink. To live fully is to accept that our somatic lexicon is layered, that some words will always sting, even as they empower. A glimpse ahead. The mirror linguistic hypothesis. I've hinted throughout this series that my interest in language is not only descriptive, but also experimental. What fascinates me is not just how words are remembered, but how the nervous system responds to them in real time, how mirror neurons, emotional resonance, and embodied reaction create a kind of linguistic feedback loop. Later in the Linguaverse, I will introduce a working idea I've been developing, a hypothesis that connects mirror neurons and language, suggesting that the way we speak not only shapes ourselves, but synchronizes us with others at the level of the nervous system. I call it the mirror linguistic hypothesis. For now, it is enough to recognize that the tongue remembers, but it can also relearn. The somatic lexicon is scarred, but it is also rewritable. That words are not only spells cast upon us, but spells we can recast ourselves. Micro-reflection. What word do you most want to reclaim or rewrite in your somatic lexicon? Why that one? Micro-activity. Write the word on a piece of paper. Say it aloud once in its old form, noticing your body's reaction. Then rewrite it with your chosen meaning and speak it 3 times. Notice the shift, even if small. This is the beginning of rewriting the tongue's memory, the tongue's living archive. We've traveled far in this episode. Together we've explored how language is not only a tool of communication, but also an archive of memory, written into the body as much as the mind. In part 1, we uncovered the somatic lexicon, the body's living dictionary, where words carry not just definitions but sensations. Every insult, every praise, every silence leaves its trace. In part 2, we examined how trauma, withheld language, and repetition carved deep grooves in this lexicon. Words like behaved became loaded with compliance and suppression. Words never spoken, "I love you," "I'm proud of you," became entries of absence, shaping identity as powerfully as presence. In part 3, we widened the lens to families, cultures, and lineages. We saw how words flow across generations. Affectionate nicknames, dismissive phrases, cultural ideals like polite that can mean respect in one setting and repression in another. We traced how collective memory, accents, and taboos form cultural archives that shape belonging and exclusion. In part 4, we turned toward healing. We explored how words like strange or crazy, which were considered dismissive, can be reframed into originality and daring. We saw how neuroplasticity, ritual, and repetition allow us to rewrite the tongue's memory, layering new meaning onto old scars. The thread that ties all this together is simple but profound. The tongue remembers, but the tongue can also relearn. Words bind us to history, but they also open futures. The tongue as threshold. The tongue is not merely an organ of taste or sound. It is a threshold, the crossing point between inner thought and outer reality. Every time we speak, we cross that threshold. We draw from our inner archive, our somatic lexicon, and cast words into the world. Sometimes this is unconscious. We repeat inherited phrases without thought. Sometimes it is intentional. We speak vows, confessions, promises with full awareness. Either way, the act of speaking is never neutral. The tongue carries memory forward, but it also shapes what comes next. To say "I'm sorry" is not just to acknowledge the past, it is to attempt repair. To say "I love you" is not only to describe a feeling, it is to create a bond in real time. This dual nature is why the tongue is both archive and instrument, scar and wand, memory and possibility. It remembers where we've been, but it also writes where we are going. To see the tongue as a threshold is to recognize that every word is a choice, a chance to carry old echoes forward or to introduce something new. Personal reflection. The word different, one of the words that shaped me deeply and still echoes in my somatic lexicon, is different. As a child, it was never a word I claimed for myself. It was one others placed on me. Sometimes it came gently, "You're a bit different." Sometimes it came as mockery. "Why are you so different?" Either way, my body always registered the same message. You don't belong in the circle. At school, different was rarely meant as a compliment. It meant not fitting into the categories that made sense to teachers or peers. It meant being too curious, too quiet at times, too outspoken at others. It meant reading things others didn't, asking questions others wouldn't, struggling to perform normal when normal felt alien. The word lodged in my nervous system. Being called different was both an accusation and a subtle exile. My chest would tighten, my stomach churned, as if I needed to prove that I wasn't too far from everyone else. But with time, and through a lot of reflection, I began to see another side to the world. Different is not only exile, it is also possibility. Every innovation, every work of art, every new idea comes from someone different. To be different is to see from another angle, to question what is accepted, to find paths others overlook. Now, when I hear the word, it holds both meanings. There is still a trace of the old wound, the memory of being outside the circle. But there is also pride, even gratitude. Being different has given me the ability to create, to imagine, to build projects like the Inversiverse, the body knows, and now the Linguaverse. The tongue remembers, but it also relearns. Different once meant isolation. Now it also means originality. The contradiction remains, but it is a contradiction I can live with. Reflection for you. What words do you carry? You too have words etched into your somatic lexicon. Some were spoken to with tenderness. Others carried sharpness. Some were repeated until they felt like definitions. Others were withheld, their absence leaving an ache. Pause and ask yourself, which words were you praised for? Which words were used to correct or diminish you? Which words were withheld, never spoken but always longed for? Which words did your family or culture repeat until they became unquestioned truths? Which words still echo in your nervous system decades later? Notice not just the thoughts, but the sensations. Does your chest expand with warmth? Does your stomach clench? Does your throat tighten? These somatic reactions are the body's dictionary. They are how the tongue remembers. Then ask, which words do I want to carry forward? Which do I want to release? Which do I want to reclaim? Activity. Rewriting your lexicon. To close this episode, I invite you into a practice, not abstract reflection, but a lived activity that engages body, voice, and memory. Step 1. Write the words. On a page, list 3 words that wound you and 3 words that strengthen you. Trust what comes quickly. Step 2. Speak the wounds. Say each word aloud. Feel your body's response. Is there contraction, heat, shame, defensiveness? Notice where in the body it registers. Step 3. Speak the strengths. Now say each strength word aloud. Notice the difference. Perhaps your shoulders drop, your chest opens, your breathing steadies. Step 4. Choose one word to reframe. Take one of the wound words. Ask, how might I layer this with new meaning? If it once meant exile, could it now mean originality? If it once meant weakness, could it now mean vulnerability? Write the new meaning beside the old one. Step 5. Speak the new meaning. Say the reframed word aloud 3 times. Feel how the body responds differently. The old trace may remain, but the new layer begins to take hold. Step 6. Create a lexicon entry. On your page, write the word as if it were a dictionary entry, but in your own somatic lexicon. Define it in both its old and new meanings. See them side by side, not in conflict, but in dialogue. This is integration, not erasure. By repeating this practice, you begin to rewrite the tongue's memory, not by pretending the past never happened, but by choosing how it lives in you today, from symbols to spells. This episode has been about memory, how the tongue remembers what has been spoken, withheld, and repeated. But language does not only carry the past, it also casts the future. Every word we speak is more than communication. It is a symbol that can become a spell. Words not only describe reality, they create it. They shape perception, influence behavior, bind identities, and even alter physiology. In the next episode, From Symbols to Spells, we will explore how language moves from symbol to incantation, from communication to enchantment. We will ask, when does a word stop being a label and start becoming a spell? And how can we become conscious spellcasters of our own lives? Until next time, stay curious, stay awake to your own language. You've been listening to the Linguaverse, James Miller.